When looking for apartments to rent in Germany, the more filters you add to your search, the less availability you will find and probably most expensive ones as well. In this video, we explore 10 filters you should consider when looking for apartments to rent in Germany, which will increase your chances to renting an apartment fast and within your budget. First filter is the size of the apartment.
Right. The size of your apartment, more specifically the square meter size of your apartment, is one of the most important factors that drives and determines the price that you pay for rent. To give you like a little bit of an idea is that living quarters in Germany tend to be smaller than, for example, in the US, but bigger than, for example, in Japan. Next to the square meter size, the number of rooms also plays a role.
Now, here it's important to clarify what is a room. You have to know that in Germany, a room is counted as your living room as well. So if you're looking for a 3-bedroom apartment, you should be looking for a 4-room apartment in Germany.
In cities in general, the availability of flats, especially like bigger flats, tends to be smaller than in rural areas, meaning that the average size for a flat in a city in Germany is smaller than 90 square meters.
For more information about the sizes of apartments in Germany, we do a deep dive into sizes of apartment in Germany in a video in our channel that you can check out there. Second filter to consider are shared flats, or in German called WGs.
Short for Wohngemeinschaft. Now, a big disclaimer we would like to give is a WG is typically only suitable if you're moving without kids. So for single people or maybe couple, it depends a little bit on what lifestyle you're looking for. We also need to point out that a shared room will not be cheaper in terms of price per square meter, but it will most likely be cheaper in the total price that you pay for rent. If you're looking for a shared room in a flat, then you're most likely looking at room sizes that vary between 12 to 30 square meters and that vary in price literally from 250 to around about 1,000 euros. The price is highly dependent on the type of room you're looking for, whether it's furnished, how many rooms in total are in the flat, the location, and of course also the condition of the flat.
The most popular website to search for apartments in Germany is immoscout24.de. However, if you're looking for WGs, a hot tip is to actually search within wg-gesucht.de. Why is the reason for this? Because for this video, we also did research and we compared the amount of apartments available in immoscout, shared apartments, versus the ones available in wg-gesucht.de. And here are the results.
Throughout this video, we will focus on numbers in the 6 most popular cities for internationals in Germany. And as we can see that on average, not everywhere, but roundabout, WG gesucht shows double the amount of shared rooms available than, for example, Immobilien Scout.
Now, another disclaimer, all the numbers that we're talking about on this table and further on, they're based on us doing a search on a day in December 2022. So of course, if you're doing the search yourself today, whenever this day is for you when we're watching this video, the numbers are going to be different. But this is just going to have, it's just to have like a bird's eye view on the market, what the market reflects in Germany in terms of apartments. Third filter is the floor. But not the floor in terms of like the flooring of your apartment, but in which floor your apartment is in relation to the building.
Based on, yes. And here also, big disclaimer, the first floor in Germany is not the ground floor. The first floor actually is the first floor. But in a lot of countries, the first floor is considered the ground floor.
Yes.
So that is always a little bit confusing.
So just to visualize this, if you have a building, what other countries consider the first floor in Germany is called the
Erdgeschoss, which equals ground floor.
Yes, and the first floor in Germany, what others consider second floor, is actually the
Erste Etage,
which is the floor above the ground floor. So of course, if you're looking for, you will rarely find apartments. No, you do find apartments in the Erdgeschoss, right?
Yeah, of course. So pretty much what we are getting at here is that the best idea is to leave the floor filter open, because the moment you, for example, want to live on the ground floor, first floor, whichever it is, or let's even say on the top floor. Those are of course more scarce because every building has abundance of floors in between, but those are only existing ones. And the numbers that we pulled from the 6 cities just verify that. We looked at the top floors because they tend to be sought after because you have a nice view and you don't have neighbors on top of you, which sometimes above you, which is sometimes something you might want to look at. But the scarcity is just very big because on average only 10% of the available flats during our sample were on the top floor.
Now the fourth filter is outdoor space.
Now outdoor space, when we talk about apartments in German cities, usually comes down to a balcony or a terrace.
Or a garden.
Or a garden, that's true. Sometimes also gardens can be shared so that they have access to the garden, but it's not your garden per se.
True. Versus balconies and terraces are never shared.
No.
Okay.
No. You might be able to look at them, but you not share them.
Yes.
Also important to know is that a balcony or terrace will count as part of the total square meter size of the flat. So usually it's between 25 to 50% of the actual flat of, let's say, the balcony. As an example, if you are looking for a size flat of 60 square meters and this flat that you're looking for would also have a total size 5 square meter balcony, and let's say the balcony gets considered as 50% living space, then the total amount of square meters for the flat would be 62.5 square meters.
Now, of course, we also pulled a sample from ImmoScout to see what the situation is in regards of how many flats have a balcony and also a garden in the 6 most popular cities for internationals. And here are the results.
So what stands out is that actually, to my surprise, there is more availability for outdoor space than I expected. Because on average, let's say around 70% of all the available flats have either a balcony or a garden. What also stands out is that Berlin has by far less amount of outdoor spaces available than, for example, Munich or Stuttgart. Frankfurt is also below the average.
Another important thing to point out is that balconies are a lot more available than gardens.
In cities, which goes back to the fact that there's, of course, per house only 1 ground floor, but maybe 5 other floors with a balcony.
True. Fifth filter is the parking. If you own or will own a car, then you might consider this quite normal to have a dedicated private parking for your car. But in Germany, it's not necessarily always the case.
In cities.
In cities,
right?
yes,
Again,
in cities. We're talking about apartments in cities.
Correct, yes. So having a dedicated or private parking is quite a luxury in cities. And our numbers actually confirm that, except for one city, which really surprised me. Let's have a look at our table.
Yes.
So the table shows that on average, 30 to 40%, if we look at Düsseldorf, Hamburg, Stuttgart, and Frankfurt, of the available apartments also offer a dedicated parking space that usually comes in some form of garage. However, what is really, really mind-boggling is that Munich has over 50% of all available flats also offers a parking.
Wow.
Whereas Berlin, only 16% have available parking.
Wow.
So this shows kind of like the availability of public space or the way that houses are being built, because this is just crazy.
I agree. And also, you have to be careful with parking as well, because depending on the flat, either the parking has to be bought, like there is no negotiation, you have to take the private parking, which costs between 50, I don't know if we already mentioned, between 50 and 150 euros
on
per
average,
month
yeah.
on average. Or there are other apartments where the parking is optional.
When we say has to be bought, it's part of the rent, not
Yes.
like bought and if you own it, right?
True, true. It's part of the rent and you cannot not pay it.
Exactly, yes.
Now, what if you do have a car and you find an apartment that you love, but it doesn't have parking? There is an alternative, and that is called the... and that is called the Anwohnerparkausweis.
Which is pretty much a residence parking permit. For this, you need to apply with your local city, and it used to cost only 30 euros per year per car.
Wow.
So that is like a bargain, and that pretty much means you need to drive around your block and find an available spot, but you have like a little paper in your car which states that you're allowed to park there and don't need to always pay like a ticket every day, because that would add up tremendously. The drawback with this is, of course, that you always need to search for parking, which here in Düsseldorf, we do it, and our friends, depending on where you live, you have more availability of parking, and we are actually lucky because we have free parking, so we don't even need this kind of permit. But others, they literally sometimes look for half an hour to find a spot, and that can become really annoying.
Yes, and also on top of that, sometimes you don't want to move the car because you don't want to lose your parking,
So
right?
then you have a car, but you don't want to use it because you don't want to use your parking. So that is just contradictory.
Yes, also important to point out is that recently other cities have changed this fee, and for example, Cologne, they plan to increase this fee for 600 euros a year.
So this goes down to a law change, allowing cities to increase the prices just because at the end of the day, you're using public space. And that the permit of 30 euros usually doesn't even cover the cost of creating such a permit, of the people working to create it. So likely prices will increase for that.
Filter number 6 is kitchen. Now, why is this a filter? So if you are coming from a country where you can rent apartments and the kitchen is just a given, you have to know that in Germany it's not always the case. So this is kind of like the context. In Germany, when you rent an apartment, kitchens are not necessarily included. This means that you rent an apartment with no kitchen. I mean, there's a space for a kitchen and the connections for the kitchen appliances, but there's no kitchen. So it's your responsibility to install a kitchen, or if the previous tenant wants to sell you the kitchen, you can buy it from them. However, in recent years, according to our numbers, as we have discovered for this video, the availability of kitchens just has increased.
I would also like to add that it seemed like, and I've stumbled over this discussion in other forums, that the kitchen has always been more or less a regional thing in that sense. And in my area, NRW, where I also grew up, this is not such a sought after feature. Whereas in the north, people say, well, all of my apartments always had a kitchen. And now our numbers actually support that statement a little bit. When we look at, let's say, the north in terms of Hamburg, 71% of the available flats actually do feature some sort of kitchen. That is way above my expectation.
Yes.
And also Stuttgart and Frankfurt are in the similar lines. Whereas Düsseldorf, again more the Rhineland area where I come from, only 47% of the available flats have some sort of kitchen. That is still above what I would have expected and supports the statement that in recent years kitchens have become more popular as a built-in feature. Let's put it that way.
Now, bear in mind that just because the apartment is listed that it has a kitchen, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's included. It could still mean that you need to buy the kitchen off from the last tenant.
Correct.
Another thing to point out is that if there is a built-in kitchen that is included in the apartment, meaning the landlord bought it and they're not charging you for it, most likely your rent will also be a little bit higher because of that. Seventh filter is the elevator. Oh, I love this one. But of course, this has to go with history and context, right? That of course in Europe, buildings tend to be a little bit more older, and because of that, then there was no elevators, or they didn't build elevators, and doing an elevator is just not possible or way too expensive to do in older buildings.
Just no space, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, true. So the elevator actually becomes a kind of like a luxury feature, and also our research supports that, because the average amount of available flats throughout all of these 6 cities that we're looking at is between 34 and 44%, so below half. However, a city that again surprised me is that Munich, more than 60% of the available flats do feature an elevator. Whereas Stuttgart, the available flats, only 26% of them have an elevator. That also surprised me, more like in the negative terms. Now, of course, the amount of elevators also depends a little bit on how tall houses in general are in cities. For example, in Berlin, at least from my perspective, houses tend to have maybe like 2-3 more floors than, let's say, maybe in Stuttgart. And maybe that also argues for more elevators than less. This is just a pure gut feeling and not based on statistics.
That is a very interesting observation, yeah.
What we have to point out though is also that what we mentioned previously, for example, the top floor being more scarce and more expensive, usually it's only more expensive if it comes in the combination with an elevator. If it comes in a combination without an elevator, it actually might be cheaper because you have to climb more stairs.
But you might be fitter because you have to climb up more stairs.
Are we more fitter?
No.
More fit?
No. The 8th filter is a basement. I would say I'm kind of shocked about this one because I would have assumed that every apartment has a basement.
So would I. I would have thought at least 90%. But the numbers show something different. And the numbers actually show that only 52 to 69% on average, I mean it's a big range, but have a basement in the city.
And of course, it doesn't come as a surprise that Berlin is one of the ones that have the least amount of apartments with basement. I mean, apartments available in ImmoScout 24, right? This is a sample
on the day of our sample.
Yes. Which is super interesting, right? But kind of goes on par with the scarcity of space in
Correct.
Berlin in general. The 9th filter is location. Now, there are different layers to this location scenario. Let's start with the highest one, and that is city versus countryside.
And city, of course, is more expensive. There is less living space. There's more people, it's denser. So a city will always trump, like if we talk about the same size of flat, right? Will always trump the price and the less availability over countryside. Now, interestingly enough, though, is that our numbers that we pulled do support the statement that Berlin, Munich to a certain extent, but also Hamburg are notoriously known for a very scarce and hard housing market. We took a deep dive into the numbers and actually put the available flats at the time of our sample in relation to the population in the city. and took a per capita kind of like availability density per 100,000 inhabitants. And these confirm that the availability density of flats is by far lower in Berlin and Hamburg than compared to, for example, Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, or Stuttgart. So the moral of the story is that if your job does not tie you to Berlin, Hamburg, and maybe also Munich, try to avoid these cities and you will already increase your chances of finding one.
Now to the second layer, and that is the location of the apartment within the city. So of course, apartments that are closer to a body of water, so like a lake, a river, or even the ocean, tend to be more expensive. And apartments that are closer to the Hauptbahnhof, or main train station of the city, tend to be cheaper. Now, why is the reason for that? That is because red light districts tend to be closer to the main train station, and this attracts a crowd of homelessness and sometimes even drug abuse around those areas. So because of that, apartments tend to be a little bit cheaper than in other parts of the city.
Because it's not the most likable area to live in.
Totally. Now to the third layer is, of course, neighborhood impacts the price of the apartment. So there are expensive neighborhoods and not so expensive neighborhoods. So for you to have an idea, we will jump into the most expensive neighborhoods in each popular city that we have mentioned already in this video.
Usually the most expensive neighborhoods are also kind of like the in or trendy neighborhoods. So it's kind of up to you to choose. Do you want to be right in that hub and pay extra dollars for it? Or euros, better said? Or would you rather, seek out a more balanced rental price and then maybe travel to those hip neighborhoods if you would like to experience them?
Yes. So let's start with the first city, and that is Düsseldorf.
Correct.
Probably the best city in Germany. Not biased at all. Kidding.
So for Düsseldorf, the four most expensive neighborhoods are the Medienhafen, the Altstadt, Karlstadt, kind of like the city center, and Oberkassel, very close to the water, to the Rhine.
The ones for Berlin are Mitte, and now it's double names, and Ivan told me I should do them fast, so I'll do my best. And that is Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, Charlottenburg, Wilmersdorf, Pankow, and that's where Prenzlauer Berg is. Prenzlauer Berg is.
Which is a super popular place to be and live. For Munich, it's the Altstadt-Lehel neighborhood, Ludwigsvorstadt und Isarvorstadt, Maxvorstadt, and Schwabing.
Now for Hamburg is Hafen City, Roterbaum, Haversterhude, Haversterhude, and Altstadt.
For Stuttgart, it's Degerloch, Stuttgart Nord, Sillenbuch, and Stuttgart West. And here, what stood out for me is that unlike in the other cities, the city centers are most sought after. In Stuttgart, because look at it in a semi-like castle, like in a tiny little valley, actually the neighborhoods that are right on the skim of the valley, so overlooking the city, are the most expensive. Again, like the view and location really play a role individually of each city.
That is super interesting. And now jumping to Frankfurt, the most expensive neighborhoods there are Westend, Innenstadt, Sachsenhausen Nord, and Nordend. Now the 10th filter is public transportation. Now disclaimer here, unfortunately on immoscout24.de, at least when we did the research or we took the sample, you cannot necessarily filter close or nearby public transportation.
Correct. However,
yeah, so I was going to say, so two ways of figuring out if the apartment listed is close to public transportation is either A, in the description of the flat, it says close to public transportation.
But they always formulate it in a way that it sells better, so rather double check with Google Maps.
Yes, exactly. And the second thing is to take the address or the area where the listing is and see what is around that area. So if you have a convenient access to public transportation, then prices might be a little bit more expensive.
However, if you're directly next to a tram or train line, then that might impact and give you a slightly lower rent because noise pollution may be very high. That of course depends, like noise pollution, on what you're used to. If you come from a very big city with a lot of traffic, that might be, like that not even interest you, and go for it because you might have a cheaper rent. If you come from more of a quiet area, countryside, green living, then maybe try to yield away from living directly next to tram lines, because we do live next to them and they can be very loud.
Yes. So to give you a real example, an apartment like where we currently live in now, which is 47 square meters for 2 adults, which is relatively small for 2 people, with 2 rooms, meaning 1 living room and 1 bedroom, no elevator, not renovated.
No balcony.
No balcony. These are the most common flats you can find in Germany.
And they also tend to be the cheapest. Of course, everyone is looking for different living standards and criteria when looking for a flat to rent or a new home. So you need to decide for yourself which of these 10 filters are negotiable or non-negotiable for you.
We hope that with these 10 specs, you can navigate the apartment search in Germany more smoothly. If you're curious for a detailed how to find an apartment in Germany, we have created a video which you can click on the left. Until next time,
Tschüss!
The sixth filter is, let me do it again. The sixth, filter number 6 is kitchen. More fitter, va? Fitter, more fit.
But we were
Shocked.
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 Taught differently?
We were shocked.
Yeah, okay.